Garage and me, founder Jesse Berg. This week we are talking to Lauren Jenkins, founder of Mini Money, who I met. I actually don't remember how I met you, but at some point we ran into each other doing something, discovered that we are super values aligned in how we think about entrepreneurship and money management and access to capital. And Lauren is awesome. So I am delighted to talk to him today about the things that he's working on. Lauren, you can give yourself a little introduction.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Lauren. I grew up in Longmont, Colorado. Went to school at, I'm trying to think, like, I don't even know how far back to go. So I went, got my undergrad at Campbell University, roll humps. I ran track and field out that way. Got my master's in London. So went to the University of East London and worked out there for a year. So that was beautiful. Loved everything except for the weather. And then worked in finance for a while, discovered that it wasn't for me, moved back home right before COVID started, and started now we're a nonprofit, but our whole thing was based around youth financial literacy. So that was, dang, 6.5 years ago, which is wild to say out loud. So yeah, we've been teaching kids and then now adults and communities about like financial literacy and then entrepreneurship and kind of just trying to help people have a better relationship with a topic that like most of us weren't taught about growing up.
Yeah. So one of the things I think a lot of people don't even realize is that financial literacy really does need to start when you're a kid, right?
Yeah.
Because the things that you learn and you absorb from the community around you is it really shapes how you think about money all the time. I know I grew up pretty broke all the time. And when I was a kid, my mom had $50 a week in cash in her underwear drawer. And that was like our money for the week, right? Anything we needed that went into that. And actually, I'm not even sure if it was for the week or for the pay period. Um, but like my early money was don't spend it, we don't have it, full stop. And then that was something I had to unlearn as an adult when I got to be financially stable and when I changed. And so, how have you found that kids show up in your programs and what are the things that they need to know? And how do you encourage them to think about money as this concept that they don't have a ton of control over until they really, really do.
Yeah, and I think it's partially because of like that we see it as kids growing up because one way or another it's going to impact your parents, but kids have a curiosity around money. Like a lot of the ways that we teach and why we teach is because during COVID, like teachers are like, look, like it's hard to engage our students. And the one thing that they keep asking about is financial literacy. Like, how do we obviously everybody says balance a checkbook. We don't use checkbooks anymore, but like that's the sentiment is like kids are not dumb. They have social media, they have parents, they have friends. They see that money is making the entire world spin. They just know that they're also not getting the education that like goes alongside of that, right? And so I think for me and for us, like I think the biggest thing it has to be the relationship with it. Because when you don't know about money, we can put it on a pedestal, right? And so I think the number one thing we want to do is knock money off of a pedestal and say, yes, it's important. Yes, it makes the world go round. And yes, you need it to survive. But at some point, your happiness level is going to drop off after you meet your basic needs. So we need to have a basic needs conversation. But ideally, we have a bunch of kids who then now know how to meet their basic needs. And then the conversation switches. And it's now, well, then what do you want to do? What are you passionate about? What's your purpose? And a lot of those conversations and like, what are your values really come into money, which I don't think we necessarily like explore. We just think, oh, if you know how credit works and you can save money, then you're good, but that's just the starting point.
Yeah. And so you found as you went into this world of youth financial literacy that it turned out that programming needed to get expanded to entrepreneurship and it needed to get
Mhm.
expanded to adults. And how did that process happen where you realized, like, oh,
Mhm.
I started here, but it's actually bigger than that. And I want to pursue some of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think if I had $1 for every adult who said, I wish I would have had this growing up, we would never fundraise again. Because I think again, like if you don't learn it or get taught this early on, you don't just necessarily like you don't just pick it up out of nowhere. And yes, we learn how to pay our bills, but that doesn't mean you have a good relationship with it or know all the tools that you have at your disposal. And a lot of times, a kids, especially until they're 18, 19, 20, their financial health is going to be linked to their parents. So I can teach your kid how money works, but if you're at home and you're not able to spend it correctly, then we're only able to make but so much of a dent, right? And so I think that the getting into like the parents and the community base was just like a natural progression because I mean, I've had plenty of kids say like, "Yo, can you teach my mom this?" Like nobody taught my mom this. Which I think is I laugh, but it's also like you're right. Like this is not something that we were taught growing up. And I'll never forget. So we got into entrepreneurship because one of the earlier slides that like I'll show on the presentation is the cost of living. So since 1970, 19, yeah, I think 1970, wages have essentially stagnated and everything else is four, five, six times more expensive. Housing, food, transportation, self-care. And I remember I'm teaching this slide, and we're at one of the more, I'll say one of our more vocal classes. And one of the kids was like, "Yo, so what the hell are we supposed to do? Like, you can't budget your way out of this being like a higher cost of living." And I had to sit there and I was like, "Yeah, you're right. Like, I'm telling you that this is a system that we're in. And then here's how you manage the money that you do have. But we need to start to close that like wage gap, right? Like, if our wages don't increase, you can't budget your way out of poverty." And I'm not, and I think there's enough workforce type of organizations out there, and I think we can always do better. But I also believe that like a lot of these young people also want to be entrepreneurs. And I think that's one of the cooler things that's come from the rise of social media and seeing other people say, like, whether it's an influencer or just being able to market your products across social media, like, I think we have more avenues for people to be entrepreneurs, and whether that's like a side hustle or a full-blown thing, like if you get an extra $1,000 to $2,000 in your pocket, that can change your life and that can change your trajectory, that can change the job that you have to do, that can change whether or not you even want to have a job. And so I think we wanted to get into this space because again a kid was like, what are we talking about? And also because I don't think we talk about entrepreneurship is something that's like attainable for everybody. It's like, oh, well, I have to quit my job and I have to drop out of school and I have to have all these hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of funding. And it's like, or you can go paint people's nails because that's what you'd like to do. And then now you got an extra $200 in your pocket. And now we can start to expand and like see what that looks like. So we call them side hustles, but I do think it's just an introduction to like a more approachable way to do entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I find really interesting about that side hustle thing, where we do live in this culture where a lot of times if you are in a lower wage industry, you don't have a lot of job experience in a specific field, or you're young, and you run into that problem that has been true for, I'm 40, and it's been true at least since I was like 15, that no one wants to hire you unless you have 3 to 5 years of experience. But you're like, how am I going
Mhm.
to get 3 to 5 years of experience if I need 3 to 5 years of experience to get the entry level job? Like I
Yeah,
don't.
yeah,
And kids are still, I was just having a conversation with this a couple of weeks ago with a recent graduate at Fort Lewis from Fort Lewis College in Durango. And so,
yeah.
35 years and we're still having the same conversation. Um, but this idea of we need to have a second job, or we need to do more things. We need to be working all the time in order to hustle, because if you don't hustle, you're never going to make it ahead unless you both come from money and have access to the money that you come from, right? Because I think it does
Yeah.
a disservice to a lot of people who come from wealth to say just because your parents have wealth, you have access to it,
Yeah.
because that's not always necessarily true. And so, how do you teach how to balance those things of you need to have enough money to live, you can't budget your way out of poverty, but you also need to balance the amount of time you're working so that you have time to have a life around that.
Yeah, and just because I teach about side hustles doesn't mean that I agree with the fact that we have to have a side hustle, right? Like I do consider this somewhat of a necessary evil. Like ideally, we can all get jobs that we care about and we can work 30 hours a week and we can pay for the things that we need to pay for, right? Like that is the perfect world. But that's also not where we live. So I like to prepare the students for the world that they're going to enter. And then if it changes, cool, we're over prepared. But also this isn't a new concept for a lot of kids that come. And I just use low income, middle income. So if you come from a lack of money, you know how to hustle. But we just haven't been told that you know how to hustle, that this is what entrepreneurship is. So if even like let's say you grow up and you see your mom working 2 to 3 different jobs, well now she has a bunch of side hustles. I would argue that that is a form of entrepreneurship because now you are managing different parts of it, like of that space. And so the I think to maybe even make myself feel better about what we teach, I exclusively lead with like what comes naturally to you and what are you passionate about. Because if we're going to pick up a side hustle, it might as well be something that we enjoy doing. Like, and this is no knock. I think it is one of the best things that has happened to like the gig economy, but not everybody wants to do Uber Eats, right? Like, not everybody wants to like stay up until 3 a.m., pick up drunk people from the bar and go home. Like, there are some kids who, like, yo, I love to do hair and nails. So, if that's a passion that you have, you will be more likely to stick to that and also bring in money because it's an area that you care about and you're naturally detail oriented and you're artistic and you're all creative and all these other things, right? So I really like to like if you just want to do Uber Eats or you want to babysit, which again, some people love to babysit, don't get it twisted. But like if you want to do a standard side hustle type of a thing, pick up an extra gig, that's fine. But a lot of the times kids don't want to do that. So it's okay. How do we pick up a side hustle in an area that we actually care about? Because then it doesn't feel like as much work. So for me, I coach on the side. I have been in sports my entire life. I've had coaches that have impacted me. And so, yeah, technically I get paid to coach, but it doesn't feel like I'm working. Like sometimes you got to mount the kid, ain't it? But like that's that's par for the course. So for me, like I love to coach, and then I also can just so happen to get paid to coach. And whereas a lot of times are like, oh, if I were to pick up doing Uber right now, I would be miserable, and I would exclusively be there for the money. So as much as we can, we try to find these areas that you would do for free, and then you just figure out a way to capitalize on it. So it doesn't feel like I'm working 14, 16-hour days.
Yeah. And I think one of the key differences for me between a lot of something like an entrepreneurial side hustle where you're doing something like hair and nails or you're babysitting or you're doing a lot of these kind of intro to entrepreneurship businesses are service-based businesses. They're things you can
Mm,
start without any capital. You don't need a ton of supplies. You can do it with the time that you have. Which is also true of Uber Eats, but the key difference is when you're doing a service for other people in your community, like hair and nails or babysitting or whatever, you're setting your own rates for that, right? You have
mm.
control over that money. Whereas Uber Eats, you're at the whim of whatever percentage they have decided to do that day. And so I know for a lot of people, that's the draw of entrepreneurship is you have a level of control that you just don't have when you work in the broader more central gig economy, or sometimes even when you're at your job, depending on what industry you're working in. Teaching is famously underpaid, and that's a really rough job. And so you can be as passionate as you want about teaching, but it's really hard to make a living in that profession. Um, and so I like that about when you're encouraging entrepreneurship, that control of having those income pieces, particularly for people who are in situations where having that control is important and being able to make choices about their money is something they haven't necessarily been able to do before.
Yeah, it's I also think again it starts to hit on other pieces, right? Because we're not just talking about money, we're talking about passion, we're talking about purpose. It's like, what do you, I hate the term, but I always ask my girlfriends, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And like, if you go from working a shift at a fast food spot where you're getting paid minimum wage and you have to deal with, I mean, just working in fast food, and then you go and do hair and nails and you get to work when you want to work, you get to pick who your clients are. Like, that starts to give you a sense of like autonomy that starts to like show you that you can do these things when there's probably not too many other places in your life that you can be able to do those things. So yes, it's about money, but I also think you start to believe in yourself more. Like that first paycheck you get from working from yourself, I don't know if there's anything better than that. And that's I mean, in the best way possible, that's a drug. Like you're trying to tell me I woke up, did what I wanted to do today, and still was able to like pay my bills. Like that is if I can introduce that to as many youth as possible, I think we start to change the narrative around like what it means to work. But a lot of times we can't do those things, or we haven't been introduced. We think that we can't do those things, right? But you're going to hustle regardless. So you're either going to hustle for Mickey D's or you're going to hustle for yourself. And most times, if you give that option to people, they're going to pick themselves. And not everybody, but a lot more people than I think folks would expect.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that about how it's a drug. So my first paycheck for myself is actually hanging on my wall over there. It's in a
Is it? I
frame. It's
love
above the light switch in my office. Because it is,
that.
it's true. Like you did a thing. Somebody paid you for the thing that you want to do.
Mhm.
And it is a really powerful thing. I started a business because I wanted control over my finance and I was tired of people underpaying me all the time. I was hustling anyway, might as well hustle for myself. And that is a really true statement. And so mini money, like Outgrow Your Garage, works all over the United States. How do you manage that, right? You live in Colorado. There's a lot of people are kind of hit or miss on virtual programming these days. A lot of times people don't necessarily trust somebody to come in and teach them about something like entrepreneurship or money if they're not from their community. And so how do you build that nationwide buy-in to the programming that you're running?
That's a good. I mean, it's been very organic, right? So the first place out of state that we worked was in North Carolina. Well, I went to undergrad in North Carolina, and so I had some connections out there. We've like moved up to working in New York, and again, we also build some technology. So technology is a little bit different in that like people will pick it up across the country, and they're like, okay, if this works, I will use it in my classroom. But I think for a lot of the like in-person stuff that we do, it really is word of mouth. Just because I don't think that many folks talk about money in the way that we talk about money. And this isn't a knock. I mean, maybe it is a knock. I don't think they're going to sue me. Like banks have historically taken advantage of people, and they are also not great at doing financial literacy. And that's a blanket statement. There's a few folks that are okay at it. But in general, like financial literacy is a space that is underserved. So when you do well in this space and you talk about money in a way that relates to people, and yes, we say kids, but again, like a lot of these kids and their parents we work with. So when you are able to do something different in a space that is so aligned with shame and isolation and a lot of these like negative connotations, and you at the very least can say, okay, I'm just not going to sit up here and lecture for an hour and a half. Like, let's do an engaging activity. That automatically puts you in like a different category. And then, God forbid, you put a little bit of technology behind it. Like, now we look like we're revolutionary, but I'm in my head, I'm like, yo, we're just getting started. Like, I haven't had the most success with technology because of different like challenges that we faced in funding and all of that. Like, this to me is like what we've been able to piecemeal together. And this is like mind blowing for a lot of folks. I'm like, yeah, like, but this is where it needs to start. I don't know, it's like super early in the game, but like, we're developing a video game. Like, because I genuinely think, like, one, where do most, I mean, shoot, not kids, me too. Like, where do a lot of people spend a lot of their time willingly? It's playing video games. And they also want to understand about money. So if we can put a video game into a classroom that helps kids understand about money and teachers are a little bit more hands off, like, that's a win win. So I think there's a lot of this gamification and experiential learning and honestly just like meeting people where they're at. Like there is something to like going into a classroom and not telling poor kids that they're bad or dumb that which just like unlocks a different conversation because that's what you hear all the time. If you don't have money, you're dumb, or you should have done something better. You should have saved. Well, what if it's either you save or you eat? Like, and when you phase it that way, now we can have a different conversation. Cool, you're not doing anything wrong, but if you want to get ahead, here are some of the steps that you're going to have to take. Is wildly different than, oh, you should be doing this. Well, no, we shouldn't live in a space where we can't pay our bills unless it's a two-income household. Like, there's a lot of things we shouldn't be doing, but we are.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it is true. And that's that was a huge thing. I remember having a argument with one of my aunts when I was, I don't know, right out of college, and she was like, "Well, you should really have health insurance." And I'd be like, "Great, here's my budget, and if you can explain to me how I can afford health insurance and my rent,
Mhm.
I'm happy to listen, but the dollars aren't there." And it like had just never occurred to her that that would be a thing. I was like, "It's not provided by my job. This is how much it costs. These are my choices.
Mhm.
Great. Tell me what the other options are." And I think a lot of people don't realize that of if you haven't been in that situation or you aren't living in that situation, then it is hard to register exactly how far that money needs to stretch and how unattainable those things are or can be. Um, and one of the things I have really appreciated about talking to some of your entrepreneurs is they're so curious. I went in and did a guest talk on how do you get over starting your business, right? You just have to start at some point. It doesn't matter how much planning you need to do, it doesn't matter what's going on. Like you just have to start doing it and learn from there. And I think that's a huge, your kids hit every single question that I get from every single adult in my life. They really nailed the like, but what about this? What about that? What about this? How do we start?
Mhm.
And that feeling of talking people through that is one of my personal favorite things about working with entrepreneurs and working with people who are growing. So how do you foster in your teaching that you let them keep that curiosity? They showed up at the end of this program going, we're really curious and we're really jazzed, and you built that. So what are some ways that you build that in your teaching to get kids and adults and other people excited and maintain that excitement?
These are good questions, man. I think so, and it's funny what a lot of the youth and adults, but we focus more on youth side hustles for now. You would be amazed at the amount of time it takes for me to get them to build a side hustle that they actually care about. So, for example, I was working at a university out here. We had a bunch of first generation college students, and there was this young lady who came into class every single day, new set of nails, makeup was looking fantastic, hair was always done. She said that she could literally take a picture, like if you showed her a picture of a haircut, she would cut somebody's hair. So she's cutting people's hair across campus, she's doing nails across campus, like before every big date, dance, dinner, anything. Like she is the place to go. We have probably a day and a half long conversation about everything that she loves to do. I then ask her what she wants to do as her side hustle. And she says, oh, I want to be a day trader. And I looked and I was like, okay, after everything that we just talked about, like, why did you say day trading? Oh, because that's what makes money. That's like the only thing that I know. And again, she's a first generation student. She's an immigrant. So like we put this pressure on ourselves and we think that the only way to make money is in the way that money is being made. So I have to go into finance, I have to go into law, I have to be really good at sports. Like I have to go to these high wealth professions. But I think that's just a lack of exposure. And so, like, I think a majority of the time we're spending saying what comes naturally to you. Because if it comes naturally to you, then that's a talent, that is a skill, and you're going to do that better than other people. And also, what do you care about? And like, we probably spend a day and a half just talking about those two things because we'll talk about it, and then it's, yeah, cool, I'm going to law school. You don't like to read and you hate studying. Why are you going to law school? You love, like, you are probably the best like streamer I've ever seen in my life, or like whatever it is that you want to do, right? And I think we always think that like kids always think, okay, we have to chase money. And then if you chase money, you don't find passion, you find a chase. You keep chasing money because money's never going to stop running. And that's what I think kills creativity and kills interest, is if I think I'm going to be in this chase for forever. But if I tell you, hey, look, I want the only thing I care about, I'll figure out a way for it to make money. I just need you to tell me what you care about and what you're good at. And if you mirror those two things, well, you can talk about what you care about at nauseum, which is why I think, and that's such a like a great. I'm glad that you were able to say that because I never even thought about that. But yeah, like I'm glad that you were able to see how curious they were. But it's because they were asking questions about stuff that they cared about. I didn't tell them to open up their own clothing line. I don't know a damn thing about sewing. I really don't. I can't sew to save my life. But they did an entire fashion show, and now we're working on like basically trying to clothe half of the like the professional women in Denver. Like they, but it's, I didn't come up with that, right? All I said was do something that you care about. But I think that that's not something that's taught, or like especially not talked to kids who don't have money. And so when you do finally tell them, no, like we can do whatever, you just tell me what you care about. Now they have this sense of ownership. And now they're like, well, yeah, I'm curious about it because it's mine. Well, yeah, it's yours. Let's work on it. So yeah.
Yeah. And so when you work with these kids and you see and they start these clothing lines or these hair and makeup businesses or whatever the pieces are, they start artist co-ops and do these really cool
Mhm.
community projects. How do you see those effects kind of rippling through the communities that you work in?
It's early. But I mean, just the so we have a pitch contest at the end of these events, and I try to bring as many of the influential community members that I can, whether it's funding or resources. Like, let's just get as many people who do dope stuff around youth who are passionate. And the amount of texts and emails that I get from like, yo, I actually was thinking about this. Like, can you send them this? Can you send me their name? Can you send me their number? Like, they're already like, we've got one of our like makeup girls, and she's being commissioned. I think she got commissioned to do like 3 different events last year, like between October and December, like Halloween, something for Christmas, and one other one. But it's when people see passion, you are naturally attracted to people who are passionate about what you do. And like especially when you think, I mean, again, I think there's this negative connotation on like, oh, kids don't care, they don't do this. No, I don't. I think they're not interested because you haven't given them something to care about. You haven't made it personal for them. But the second you can see a kid start to care about something, that's going to come out in different ways than we could have never imagined. So I think like, especially like, and I'm not even, yeah, I think the older generation, like that will light them up to see a young person with a spark and a passion that like is aligned with what they do. That's a match made in heaven because you have all this experience, and a lot of older folks want to give back, whether it's time, money, attention, resources, whatever. They want to give back, but they're like, I don't know where to give it. And a lot of these kids are like, I have this passion and I don't know what to do with it. Well, cool. Let's put those two things together, right? And I mean, it's across generations, but I think just in general, when you see passions, passion sparks passion. Like, and so you just kind of like let it snowball.
Yeah. I love that. So yeah, so on that note, how do people find you? How do people support the work that you're doing? What do you want them to know about? How can they give you money to support the things that you're doing?
Yeah. So yeah, if you guys ever want to donate for our youth entrepreneurs, the website's minimoney.app. Just make sure you put in the tagline that you wanted to go to the side hustle program. A lot of what we do is fundraise, work with different banks, credit unions. If you're a financial institution and you want to be better at financial literacy in your community, let us know. And for a lot of like our partner organizations, we work with a lot of schools, a lot of nonprofits, because again, they have these youth and they're like, how do we serve them better? And so that's usually where we come in and we piggyback. And if you just want to talk or you have a good idea, let me know. I probably have a youth entrepreneur who like can use a mentor. Um, we're building more tech. Like I'm kind of all over the place. I need to get a better elevator pitch for this one. But yeah, so like I said, we'd love to partner with youth serving organizations. If you want to donate, we're always down for that. And we are definitely moving into like supporting financial institutions because we can't do this work alone. And they have a lot of funding and they have a lot of people and they want to be involved in the community. And we're trying to make sure that they can be involved in the community in an impactful way. Because I don't think banks are evil. I think we may have a bad history with them, but I do think that we should be able to work together. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, and I think that is a great point about banks. We throw around the term unbankable a lot, but the way to get people to be bankable by the bank standards is both financial literacy, but also the banks themselves being interested in educating people to be able to better use their services. Um, but that's a whole separate soapbox that I've been on before, and I'm sure I'll be on again. Well, great. Thanks for your time today. All of the things that you mentioned will go into the description at the bottom of this video. Next week, Outgrow Your Garage is off because I am taking an actual real live vacation day. I'll be on an airplane, but but the week after that, we'll be talking to Cami Collins from the Office of Economic Development and International Trade for the state of Colorado about rural economic development and ways that government institutions can work together with rural populations to better serve economic growth and actually create opportunity. So yeah, so tune in 2 weeks at 10 a.m. here on the Outgrow Your Garage YouTube channel.
I'm gonna just give you a quick shout out because there's very few people that I have come in and teach. I'm like very protective of like how we teach and why we teach. And I don't know if I've ever had somebody teach better than me in a class, but you might have done it that day. And like you can just tell that you care and you ask the right questions and you like are just a very relatable human being and the work that you do matters. So I appreciate you having me on here and I appreciate the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you very much. I loved teaching for your kids. It was super fun. And so, yeah, so y'all should get involved with what Lauren's doing too. It's great.